I'll try. Is that good? All right. Way to go, Cole. Well, welcome, everyone. I'm kind of surprised to see y'all here. It just feels kind of different. You want to come and hear me talk about the Camino de Santiago, and apparently so. So we've got people worshiping online. You're worshiping online. I know one person just texted me that he was home with COVID, and so I'm not going to give you a name. And so we're also recording it. I think we're live streaming it right now. I got a list of like 20 questions from Karen Stripling. Karen, raise your hand. She said she wanted to do this, and I said, if you organize it, I'll do it. And she said, okay, I'll organize it. And it's like, we found a model for ministry at Oak Hill. Because y'all know me, I stink at organizing. So she gave me about 20 questions. I've been asking for other people, what do you want to hear during this time? And so I've got notes. And then I'm going to take questions with that. So we've got some slides that we're going to show. If it gets too boring at any point, Cole, you have permission to throw the other picture slides on. I walked the Camino de Santiago. I guess I'll get that in a minute. But our 25-year-old son joined me for a week, days 4 through 7. And my big sister, joined me for 4 days, day 21 through 25. And I can remember all that because I started on May 1st, and so I can remember every day. So I can tell you what day of the week it was. So let's begin with prayer. Oh, gracious and loving God, your Spirit moves in this world. And throughout time, you have called your people to draw closer to yourself. And one way that people have done that is through walking. And the Camino is a way of opening our hearts and lives to you. And so I pray in this time that we might continue to open our hearts and lives to you, that we might live more fully as the people you've created us to be. We pray through your most holy name. And all God's people say, amen. So I'm curious, show of hands, how many of you have walked any of the Camino de Santiago? All right, we got 4 people here. How many of you heard the Camino de Santiago before I went? Wow, that's pretty good, because I heard about it about a year and a half ago. So let me do a little bit of sharing what the Camino de Santiago is. Oh, Berkeley people, Louise Avance over here. Wait, raise your hand. Yeah, okay, all right, good. All right, so the Camino de Santiago is a pilgrimage. It is a pilgrimage to... put the next slide up. To the Santiago de Compostela Cathedral in Santiago de Compostela, all right? And so it is a spiritual journey of people going to the cathedral and to Santiago. There is not one route that is called the Camino de Santiago. There are a series of routes. So up on the screen is the map of Spain. And you can see that all those lines, if you look up in the northwest corner, that would be the upper left, all right? That's where Santiago is. It's about 100 miles from the coast. And there are lots of routes that go there. The symbol for the Camino is a seashell. And if you think about a seashell, or this one in particular, it's got kind of a point where all the lines converge with one another. That is a way to think about the Camino de Santiago. There are all sorts of routes, and the lines converge with one another, and they end up in Santiago. So I'm going to pass this seashell along. You may keep it. All right. I picked it up on the coast. The seashell is the symbol for people who are walking the Camino. And I decided I didn't want to have one as I walked. I decided I would pick one up along the sea. First of all, I thought it'd be more meaningful to do that. Second, it would be cheaper. I wouldn't have to pay $5 for a seashell. and so that is, so when you see that shell, that's what it's about. It is about all of these various routes converging in Santiago. Let me give you a little bit of history, and I have to tell you that a lot of the history is legend. So if you go home and Google this, you're going to get 5 different stories, all right? And that's just the way that it is. The Camino itself began in the 9th century, specifically around 814 AD, when either a hermit or a peasant saw lights. Compostela, Spanish speakers, Camp of Stars, all right? And there were stars that illuminated for this hermit or peasant, depending on which version you read, where the tomb of Santiago was. Now, Santiago, let's just do a little bit of translation here. Another way to say Santiago is San Diego. Another way to say San Diego is Saint James. All right? That's just a quirk of biblical translation. So you think in terms of Saint James, James of James and John in the Bible. Jesus really had 3, he had his disciples, but he had really 3 close friends, Peter, James, and John. And so this is James of James and John, of Peter, James, and John, Jesus' disciples. And this peasant or hermit had a vision, and stars illuminated him, bright lights illuminated where the burial place of St. James was. And so he went and he found the tomb of St. James. Now, how St. James got from Rome to be buried in northwest Spain, there are legends about that too. But that's what this is about. And one of the legends is that he uncovered the tomb of St. James, that the body of St. James was covered in seashells. And so when you see statues of St. James, he often has seashells all over himself. So that is what is the beginning of the Camino de Santiago, is this peasant discovers the tomb of St. James in the 9th century, and then King Alfonso II of Spain travels to verify that this is, in fact, the tomb of St. James, and establishes a religious shrine. Go back a couple of slides to that thing of Santiago. 2 more. That, yeah. So this is the now cathedral in Santiago. But it began as something small, and over the years it expanded. Is that Romanesque now, architecture people? Is that a Romanesque shrine? Sounds good. Just move on. What's that?
The round arches.
The round arches, that gives it away as what, Roy?
Romanesque.
Romanesque, I got it right. Okay, so the Camino de Santiago is one of 3 pilgrimages recognized by the Roman Catholic Church. You have the Camino de Santiago in Spain. You have the pilgrimage to Rome in Italy, and you also have the pilgrimage to Jerusalem in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. The Camino de Santiago, it begins in the 9th century, and it explodes through the Middle Ages. In the Middle Ages, about 200,000 people walked the Camino every year. In the 13th century, there are an estimated 500,000 people who were walking the Camino every year. I mean, we have a lot of people traveling that. Now, I'm going to give you, that's just the facts, that so many people were traveling. But what was going on in the Middle Ages, specifically from, is it up there? No, it's not up there, good. From the 900s to the 1200s? What's going on in the world? In Christendom? We have the Crusades going on. We have the Crusades where the Roman Catholic Church was sending military regiments to what was called the Holy Land to recapture it for Christianity. And so it was not a safe pilgrimage to go to Jerusalem. So one of the things that scholars think is that the Camino arose as an alternative to the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. And so it just explodes during that time. And then it went through a time of decline. And in the 1980s, there was a priest who got this crazy idea to revive the Camino by painting yellow arrows to point the direction. And so he went around with a bucket of paint, and started painting arrows, helping give direction so that people could then walk the Camino more easily. And so after he starts doing that, the Camino just begins to explode with the number of people who are walking it. This year, there are an estimated 400,000 people who are going to walk the Camino. All right? Now, traditionally, you would start at your front door or back door, and you would walk to Santiago, and then you would get there, and then you would walk back home. Today, it tends to be a one-way journey. All right? You go there, and then you hop on a train. All right? What I did, I don't know if we can see, we have a slide of this. The Camino Frances is what I did, is what I walked. I began in France, in Saint-Jean-Pierre-de-Port, over on the upper right side, and walked across Spain. I walked about 500 to 550 miles. I did take a bus 2 days. I skipped 20 kilometers so I could meet my sister. And then I really did not want to walk out of Santiago as I began the journey to the coast and have to walk through an industrial area, so I skipped another 25 kilometers. Excuse me. Day one, we crossed the Pyrenees. That's what I was wearing then, that's what I'm wearing now. And it was a fun hike. Roy and Juanita, y'all did part of that walk. You didn't want to stop, yeah. And it was uphill like that for 20 kilometers, so 12 miles, and then downhill like that for the next 5. And it was great. So I took 29 days walking from France to Santiago, and then I took an additional 3 days, minus skipping 25 kilometers on a bus, and walked to Finisterre, which is on the coast, because I wanted to. And I'll share a little bit more about that in a minute, I guess. Let me share why people walk the Camino. There are lots of reasons people walk the Camino. Many people treat it as a pilgrimage, either as a religious, specifically Roman Catholic journey, or a spiritual journey that's not necessarily associated with the Roman Catholic Church. Some people treat it as being just a tourist, as an adventure, because it's a pretty good adventure. And other people treat it as a romance. Particularly, I learned Japanese people treat it as a romance because there was a movie that came out in the 90s of a Japanese woman walking the Camino and meeting a Spanish national and falling in love. And so Japanese couples are actually walking the Camino on their honeymoon. Doesn't that sound like fun? Yeah. For me, I treated it as a spiritual pilgrimage of a journey. So for me, I treated it as a time of renewal through walking. I needed a time to unplug. I was tired. And I could feel it in my bones. And so I worked with what's called the SPRC in the church, and I said, I need time. And they said, take it. And I was like, whoa, that was easy. And I'm very thankful. So I took it as a time to unplug. And there is something about walking and unplugging from everything, including all those electronic devices, that is very recharging. I know that seems weird, but if you like to walk, it can be incredibly recharging to do that. Someone asked me, why didn't I just walk the Appalachian Trail? They don't have restaurants. And also, I wanted that sense of pilgrimage. Millions and millions have walked the Camino over the last 1,000 years. And there's something about this that there's just a depth to it. And that's what I needed. I just needed that time to unplug. I also wanted community. I'll share a little bit more about this in a little bit. I had no idea what an incredible sense of community I would experience, because other people are walking with you, and people are just open to sharing life together. All right, so what did I take? And what did I take? I took my backpack. It's up here. It started off at 25 pounds because I was carrying a gallon of water with me every day. And for those of you who do hiking, a gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. And so I carried a gallon of water with me about every day for the first week, and then I realized, I can do with 3 liters. And then I eventually realized, I can do with 2 liters. And I was not going below 2 liters. And so it was 20 to 25 pounds of that I carried. I carried 2 pair of clothes, toiletries, sleeping bag, a raincoat. I did have a heavy jacket that I had to wear a few times. I had a fleece jacket that I would wear at night and in the mornings, a hat, a hiking stick, my shoes, and a pair of flip-flops, because at the end of the day, it's really good to take off your hiking shoes and just wear flip-flops, and also wearing those into the shower. So let me give you a typical day. Typical day, I would walk 25 to 30 kilometers every day. So 5 kilometers is 3.2 miles, so I was walking 15 to 18, sometimes 20 kilometers. My longest day was 37 kilometers. And then my shortest day was my first day with my big sister, and she said, we're going to ease into this. And she dictated when we went. She dictates all the time. And so we started off at 15, and then we went to 20, and then we went to almost 25 one of her days. So I started off my first several days at 6:30 in the morning. When my 25-year-old son joined me, after about 2 or 3 days, he said, Dad, can we start earlier? Exactly, that was my thought. And his reasoning was he loved listening to the birds in the morning and watching the sunrise. So if your kid says, hey, can we go earlier? We did. So I started 6:30 every day. I would walk about 10 kilometers, or that would be 2 hours. I walk about 5 kilometers an hour, so 3 miles an hour. I'd walk about 10 kilometers and then stop and have breakfast. Breakfast in Spain on the Camino, if you're an American, involves a Spanish tortilla. Has anyone heard of a Spanish tortilla before? Think of a potato omelet, all right? And you would get you would go into a bar at whenever in Spain, and you would order a tortilla, and they would give you a wedge of a potato omelet, maybe a piece of bread to go with that. Then I'd get an apple or a banana and café con leche, and it was really, really good coffee too. And then I'd walk. I would finish out whatever I needed to walk that day, and perhaps I would stop and get something if I felt like it. Every few hours, it was really good just to stop and get a coffee or something and take off my boots, my shoes, and rub my feet. And then I tried to stop every day between 1 and 2, because there's just a lot of stuff you have to do every day. I would stop and I would get a bed, find a place to be able to stay. Then after I got a bed, I would take a shower, and then I would wash my clothes for the day. And then I would get kind of a midday meal, like by 3 o'clock or so, it would be a midday meal, and then make arrangements for the next day. I'd figure out how far I wanted to go the next day. Sometimes I would make a reservation. The Camino has gotten more crowded over the last 2 decades, so sometimes I would make a reservation at where I was going to stay. Other times, though, I wanted to stay in places that did not take reservations, and so it's first come, first serve. And so just get up and go. And then at night, especially when I stayed in religious places, and especially for the first 3 or 4 weeks, there were communal meals every night. Can you show them that picture? Okay, so this is staying at what is called a donativo, a donation. It's a religious place. There's no cost to stay there. You give whatever you want. And we had a mat on the floor, and then we had a big communal meal. And we all worked, and we chopped up the vegetables and everything. And then there was a pilgrim from Italy who turned it all into this incredible stew. And we sat around the table, and if you look at the table, you can see jugs of wine, because it's Spain, and some water, because you need that too. And then if you look, the picture on the bottom left is me looking to, bottom right is me looking to my left. The picture, the big one on the left is me looking straight across, and then the picture on the upper right is me looking to my right. And tables go down a narrow hall that would violate every single fire code in the United States. And we sat around and we had an incredible meal, and there was conversation going on in so many languages. The people to my left were all speaking Spanish. The people to my right, there are some parents with some kids. They were actually bicycling across Spain, and they were staying there. But they were speaking French. The people in front of me were speaking English. It's all of these different languages that were going on. And for me, that was one of the coolest things about the Camino, was experiencing those communal meals and sitting together and having conversation with one another. All right, going through some of the things you asked. All right, so I was asked to share about places, about what I encountered. So let me start with places. I stayed in what are called albergues. We would probably call them like a hostel. And the albergues on the Camino are reserved for people who are pilgrims and who have a pilgrim passport. So you pay €2 for this, and then if you're going to stay in one of the hostels, you have to present this when you check in. You may pass that around. And every single place has their own unique stamp. And so I've got, 50 different stamps on that thing. And they stamp it when you get there. There are so albergues is what we call a hostel. There are municipal albergues. Almost every town along the Camino has one. It's first come, first serve, and they are allowed to charge €8. That is the maximum. That is what they charge. And they're just bare bones. They're the religious ones that are associated with churches. And there are also privately owned and operated albergues. And the religious ones were my favorite, really because they were operated by volunteers. And that was just really cool to me. Other people stayed in hotels and hostels. When my sister joined me, she said that she was going on 3 conditions. One of them is that we go her pace. Another one, she would not carry a backpack. And so there are transportation services. And another, that she would sleep in her own room every night. And so she had to share a room one night with me, but besides me snoring, it wasn't bad. So I stayed in a variety of places. Again, the religious ones. Yeah, that's kind of what different albergues are like. Lots of bunk beds. It's just what you get. Go back to the previous slide, would you? Oh, no. There's one of the one after the, no. Do we have the one of people singing around the table?
One more time and we'll do a round.
Very good at the round. But we were singing in Latin because most people could pick up on it. So that was one of my favorite places. That was a great experience. I had that experience with my son. That was just awesome. Another place that I stayed was an ermita, a hermitage. If you can throw that picture up. This one is from the 12th century. And it's operated by volunteers from Italy. and 2 volunteers come for half a month each. And so you got 2 volunteers for half a month, and then another 2 volunteers come for half a month, and then they just keep rotating. And people come and do this every year. It's part of their Christian service, is being there and hosting. Now, this particular albergue had no electricity. It had no hot water. Well, they did have running water, because the Spanish are really big on running water. But a really cool thing happened. You look up in that chancel area. That's the old chancel of when it was a religious operating hermitage. That hermitage had space for 8 people. There were 6 there the night that I was there. If you were injured, there was room for you no matter what, because that was part of their ministry. If someone was injured, you could stay there as long as you needed. But they had us go sit in the chancel area and take off our shoes. And then the volunteers went around with warm water and a base and a pitcher and a basin and a towel, and they went around and washed our feet and dried them with the towel, and then they kissed our feet. Yeah, it's kind of different. But they said that this was a sign that they were there to serve us. And that was just really cool. And then 8 of us sat around the table that night. The languages, I spoke English and I have survival Spanish. There was a mom with two of her 20-something-year-old kids from Canada that spoke English only. There was a young woman from France who spoke French and English. There was a guy from Brazil who spoke Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. And then the volunteers from Italy spoke Italian only. Maybe a little bit of French. And so we had conversations going on in all of those languages. And it was one of those types of things. Corinne, Corinne's from Luxembourg. She speaks like 50 languages. And everyone was included in the conversation. As a conversation, someone would be translating to everyone. And I knew that it was bad when I was translating the English into Spanish so that the Italians could understand it. I mean, but that was the idea. It was such a cool thing of having that type of conversation going on. I don't have a picture of this one, but one of the places that we stayed was a private house. This was when my son James was with us. Our son James was with us, again, who's 25, and a private house owned by a woman. And she and her family were on you have an entrance floor when you come in, and then she and her family were on the next floor, and then she had like 10 or 12 beds on the next floor up. And she served the most amazing vegetarian vegan meal. It was just out of this world. And all of the vegetables were from her garden. And it was everything except the chickpeas in this curry she put together. And so it was just spread out, and we sat around the table and just had wonderful conversations going on. She and her husband met when her husband was a pilgrim, and he stopped and stayed at her albergue and kind of liked her. And so stuck around for a couple more days, and then he volunteered and did some maintenance things around her place for a few more days so he could stay for free. And then he went along and finished his Camino, and I think he was from the Netherlands, and he eventually then came back after his Camino and did more volunteering around there, and then he bought the only bar in town. And so they've been married now for at least one kid. And so he owns the bar and she owns the albergue. And it's just such a cool experience. For the first 2 or 3 weeks, there were what were called pilgrim masses every week. That every town has a church. Every town has a church. Some of them are just incredibly gorgeous. And if Cole, you want to just throw some of those other scrolling slides up, you might see some of the churches pop up. But at night, either before a dinner or after dinner, and the albergues schedule their dinners around when the Pilgrim Mass is going to be held. And it's a Roman Catholic Mass, and so done in Spanish. And so people from the town are there, but then also pilgrims go and receive a blessing after people receive the Eucharist, the communion. And it's just a really cool type of thing to experience. And it was really fun to do that with our son, too. It was a neat thing. So in Spain, I don't think I really put up a whole, yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. There are churches and cathedrals everywhere. Someone asked about the Iron Cross. Can you throw up that slide? That big cross behind you, on top of that telephone pole, there is a big cross. And that is on a hill that Emma put that is at least 10 feet high. I would call it 20 feet high. And it's been formed by people dropping rocks there. So I stopped there the day before I rendezvoused with my sister, so that was day 20 for me. And when my son was with me, we each picked up a rock because we knew this was going to come. And we picked up the rock, and then when he left, he gave me his rock. And the rock symbolizes something that you're carrying, a burden that you need to give over to God. And the idea is that you stop at the Iron Cross, and you go and you lay your burden down and you offer it to God. And then you continue on their way. The day before the Iron Cross, I had spent walking with a guy from Canada. His dad had died, and he got a rock from his dad's garden. And his mom was in memory care, and he went and took a rock to his mom and had her give it back to him. And then he took his own rock with him, too, from Canada. And so he laid down those rocks representing things that he and both of his parents had been carrying, and just laid those down and offered it to God. I found it a very liberating experience. Yeah, a very freeing experience, just to say, I'm laying this down, God. And then Santiago. All right, Santiago is the destination for the Camino. I'll be honest, I found it anticlimactic. I was walking along with about, on each day, there were probably, on the section of the Camino I was walking, there were about 200 people, more or less. That's kind of what the math says. Not that I was with 200 people, but that on that section, on that 20 to 30 kilometer section, there would be 200 people walking, which was great. It was lots of peaceful solitude time. And then you get in Santiago, and it is crowded. At least 2,500 people a day arriving from all over the place. And it was like too much for me. It really was. You might have had a different experience, Don, but it was just pretty overwhelming for me. But one of the cool things was I went to the cathedral, and they got this big Roman Catholic incense thing. Now, go to this video. You can start the video. Yeah, and there's going to be organ music going. In just a second, this little Bota Fumero is going to start going. Now, I let you know that is the size of a refrigerator, okay? This thing is the size of a refrigerator, and you're going to say, oh, this is no big deal, Stephen. Just wait, okay? Because there are about half a dozen guys that are going to be pulling on ropes, and this guy's going to give it a big push, and everyone pulls out their cell phones, even though the Archbishop has said not to do that. And the Archbishop just kind of stood back and smiled when this started happening. This was originally done, according to tradition, to defumigate the pilgrims when they had come. But it starts swinging. They're going to get going with it in a minute. And then in a minute, you'll also be able to see the contraption that they have up high. And they don't do this every day. They only do it on major feast days and a couple of other times. I was there on the feast day of the Ascension and saw it from a different direction, and then I actually went back to Santiago after I went to the coast and saw it again. That is the size of a refrigerator. The original one is made of silver, all silver, and is in a museum. So this is a reproduction made out of something less stealable. But they just get that thing going, and it is really, really cool. So y'all keep watching that for a minute, okay? So I guess that wasn't anticlimactic, but I thought that was really a cool experience. Does anybody? The question from Juanita: how does it smell? It smells incensey. I don't do smells very well. I call them stinky spells. My wife doesn't wear perfume because I go, ugh! It's not very romantic. So, you remembered it being pleasant. You have a different olfactory system than I do. All right? Yeah. So they get that going, and then eventually it's going to slow down, and a guy's going to reach out there and grab it to stop the darn thing, and he spins around a couple of times. And then one of the coolest things for the trip for me after that then was, y'all can watch that get stopped. I continued on to the coast to Finisterre or Finteta, depending on, and so that's just Land's End, the end of the world. And the guy gonna grab it now? So I continued on to Finisterre or Finisterre, depending on where you are. And there ain't nothing, you can't walk any farther. There ain't nothing but Atlantic Ocean. And continuing on. And that for me was a really, really powerful experience. Throw that next slide up. The one on the left is me reaching Finisterre, and it's like I can't go any farther. And then the next day, I got up really early and walked back out to the peninsula before I caught a bus back to Santiago, because it was just really cool out there. And I watched the sunrise, and then started my journey back. It was excellent. It was excellent. How did I decide where to stay? Distance I want to cover the next day, and advice. I did a lot of advice. Throw up one of the last pictures, would you? There's a couple. The couple on the right, Bob and Suzanne, he goes by Paco. This was his 5th time to walk the Camino, and his wife's 4th time. And then the other couple is from Australia. It was her 2nd time and her husband's 1st time. And she had told her husband, "You're retiring. If we're going to live together in retirement, we're going to go walk the Camino." But I ask people like that, what do you recommend? Where do you recommend we go? Where do you recommend I stay? What do you And so they gave all sorts of guidance. And that's really the way I operate best, is just asking people and getting feedback to that. People were from all over the place, the U.S., Europe, all sorts of European countries, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, Australia, New Zealand, Asia. There was one young woman referred to it as the yo-yo. You might walk with someone for 2 or 4 hours, and then that person would stop and get a coffee or need to go to the restroom, and you'd keep going and walk with other people or walk by yourself. And then you might meet that person later on that day, or you might meet them a week later, or you might stay with them and have dinner 2 nights later and then see them 5 nights later. It was just kind of this back and forth type of thing. Let me tell you about a few of the people that I visited with. I visited with a lot of 20-year-olds. The demographics for the Camino are people in their 20s and people in their mid-50s through up until 80. That's the demographic. A few 30 and 40-year-olds, but they're busy. They're raising their kids. They got careers. They can't do stuff like this. But I walked with a lot of 20-year-olds, and that was so cool because it was like walking with my kids. And then one of my kids got to walk with some of these 20-year-olds, and they were taking off time from work. They'd arranged their jobs where they could do this, and they were just taking off time and going. One person that I visited with was Tom. He's a British priest on sabbatical, and he was taking sabbatical, and then he was going to go start working on his PhD, and so he was just taking this time of renewal. He was Yeah, and so we walked I started walking with him day 4, and some people had told me, you need to meet Tom. You two would like. And Tom and I met as we left a town, and we just had this great conversation. We stopped, had breakfast, and we kept walking. We stopped, and we had a snack, and then we stopped. It was just this incredible experience of walking side by side with a colleague, sharing what was on our hearts. One of the favorite guys that my son and I really loved was Joel from Canada. He's a PE coach. His wife is a powerhouse lawyer and a professional hockey player, and she told him, "You're going on the Camino." It wasn't an option. She said, "You need to take a break. You're going on the Camino." And she bought him a ticket, and there and back again. That was good. I told you about Paco and Suzanne, 5th and 4th times to be walking. Great conversations with a guy from Brazil. As I walked to the coast, I actually got to walk with a lot of Spanish nationals who were doing a loop away from all the crowds. And it was conversations 100% in Spanish. And if you all know my Spanish, it is in the present and simple future tense. But having these real, genuine conversations, walking side by side. One young man that I walked with was Nicolas, a Palestinian Christian from Israel. He ended up not being able to finish because of an injury. And about 10% of people who start in France don't finish because of injury. And it was mainly young people who got injured. Old people like me knew to listen to our bodies. But the 20-year-olds, they just kept pushing. And the Camino, over 1,000 years, has established everything that people need. There are places to stay, there are restaurants, there are places to eat. There are also hospitals that are charity hospitals where people can stop and get whatever medical care that they need. I visited with one guy from Milwaukee, I think, that was in the hospital for a week, and they drained a quart of fluid off of his knee, and then he started going again. Yeah. Here's what really struck me. 2 things that really struck me, and then I'm going to let you ask some questions. And someone asked, "Is Stephen go until 10 o'clock?" And the answer is no. This is fun. I hope you're enjoying this. I experienced hospitality like I have never experienced in my entire life. I had no idea that human beings could be that welcoming. Can you imagine taking off half of a month to go work in an albergue? Yes, greet pilgrims as they come in, but also when they leave by 8 o'clock in the morning, wiping down all the beds so that lice and bed bugs don't travel among the pilgrims, cleaning everything up, people doing whatever was needed to help you feel welcome. One of the most memorable times that I had was at a restaurant, and I walked in, and everything was outside, and I heard some people speaking English, and so I went over and asked if I could join them, and they said, "Yeah, come and join us." And it was a woman, 2 volunteers at an albergue. One of them was from Portland, living in Portugal, another one from Puerto Rico, living in Idaho. And they had both given up half a month of their time, and they were sitting there visiting with pilgrims, telling stories, helping people feel welcome. They started buying tapas, appetizers for us, and because they wanted us to taste all the different foods and experiment. And just this incredible sense of hospitality and welcome, like I'd never experienced before. And one of the things, the first day going from France to the first real stop in Spain, going over the Pyrenees, it was the most crowded day. One, because there's just a bunch of people starting. You spread out after a few days. But you had 600 people starting and 400 beds at the main town. Do the math. And I got to spend a lot of time with Bernard, a guy from Germany, and he didn't get a bed. And he didn't know what he was going to. He was with Nicolas, the Palestinian Christian from Israel, and he didn't have a bed. They didn't have beds. And they saw a guy putting some stuff into his car, and he said, "Do you need some help?" And they said, "Yeah, we don't have a bed." And so he called around to all the albergues. He called his, where's the running of the bulls? Palermo? Pamplona. He called to Pamplona, which was the next big stop away. No hotels because there was some big thing going on there. And so he called some of his friends. This guy that they just met loading stuff in his car, so he called some of his friends and said, "My friends have a place for you." So they slept on the floor of a friend's house. And I just wonder how many of us would do that? Let someone come stay in our house for the night. But that's kind of the idea. The idea is that no one goes without a roof over their head. Someone will find you a place. The other thing that really struck me was the sense of community. You have all of these people walking along, and everyone is on the same journey, but their own unique journeys. And so walking along, you may walk by yourself for a while, and then you go and you match pace with someone, and you walk along with them for a few hours or a few minutes, and you have conversation. And then stopping, every town, every place where you stop, if you go to a bar or a cafe or even a restaurant or sitting around the communal meals, there's no sense of this place is reserved. You go and you sit down and visit with people. And the first questions are, "Hi, where are you from?" But then is what got you to walk the Camino? And just these wonderful conversations that happen around the table and this real sense of community. And the fact that there is wine at every single dinner really helps with that process. The Australians, they would stop, and they were having, one guy from Australia, a recently retired lawyer, he's like, "I have 2 beer every day when I stop at 2 p.m. And then you sit down with the table and you visit, and that sense of community was just amazing. All right, what did I learn? And then I'm going to let you ask some questions. One is just the incredible importance of hospitality. Now, the Roman Catholic Church has been developing a culture of hospitality for 1,000 years. They established monasteries and hermitages and hospitals all along the way to accommodate pilgrims. And so they've had 1,000 years to teach this concept of Christian hospitality. And I'm just wondering what it would be like in the church in 2025 if we learned to be that welcoming. Because it was friggin' amazing. Community, I realized how much I need that in my life. I think all of us recognize that with COVID, right? But recognizing how much I need community, how much I need to be in conversation with others. So one of the things that I have brought back with me is being insistent on being intentional about having meals with people. I can get busy. I got work to do. I want to go home and see my wife. But taking that time and intentionally spending it with others. David and Pam, we had dinner with y'all because we like you, but also I realize I have to have that community in my life. And so I'm just looking for that. And I've started picking up the check for people just so that we can be going and we missed that part. I tried. Your wife said no. I realized, I learned, I had an affirmation that at heart I am a pastor, not a preacher. I am a pastor. I love being in conversation with people. And I was amazed, walking along with people, how people opened up their lives to me. And I did not tell them I was a pastor. But people opened up, and I just realized that is part of who I am. That's part of my identity as a human being, not as a career. But I also realized how life-giving the public policy work I have been doing is for me. After the Uvalde massacre, I've gotten involved in the legislative process around gun safety and ending gun violence. And as I shared that with people, what I had been doing in that arena, first of all, people were like, yay, go, do it. And the Europeans asking, what's with the United States? But I realized how alive my body felt as I shared about that. That is energizing work for me, so that I am a pastor at heart, but also being engaged in an aspect of how we live together as human beings has become really life-giving in my life, and I notice that. And then the last thing I share is I learned a saying: let your Camino be your Camino, all right? Because sometimes people would want to say, oh, you should do this, or you shouldn't do that. Melody and Greg Parsons had us over to their house before I went on the Camino to talk with a couple of guys who had walked the Camino, and they were appalled that I did not have my way figured. I had no idea how I was getting from Madrid to my starting point in Spain. And they were appalled, and Melody called me back, and she said, my stomach is in knots that you don't know how you're getting there. And it's like, that's part of the journey for me. And I had to, people kept saying, let your Camino be your Camino. Anytime someone tried to give advice, yeah, but let your Camino be your Camino. But that also applies to me, as I have to let other people have their own Camino. And by that I mean let other people walk their own walk. We each have our own walk in life, and walk it is on your heart. I mean, don't do stupid stuff. Don't hurt others, but enjoy your own journey. Let your Camino be your Camino. And so I'm trying to be intentional about living into that. Advice: if you want to go, decide on the reason that you're going to go. Are you going as a tourist, as you're going a romance? Are you going as a pilgrim? It may change as you go along, but decide where you want to go. Think about the number of days and the route and the length. Because you can do your own thing. I walk 25 to 30 kilometers a day. You may want to, I met one woman from Germany. She said, I love this. I'm walking 35 to 40 kilometers a day. And I'm like, God bless you, woman. But one of the first, Lucas, one of the first people I met, I rode on the bus with him over to France. And he was a retired airline pilot. He was like 75 years old, and he was doing 10 to 12 kilometers a day. And he was taking 2 months. And he's going to make it. He was just doing his own pace. And then you can also walk in stages. I met one guy from Denmark. I don't have a map. Do you know how far Denmark is away from? He was walking 2 weeks a year, and he was on year 9. And I met him, he was finishing up year 9, 2 weeks of year 9, before our son left. So he still had about 4 more weeks of traveling. So it was going to take him 11 years. But he was going to do it. He was going to do it. So do what you want. All right, questions? Okay, you go from town to town.
Okay. What's it like between the towns?
What's it like between the towns? Throw up some of those pictures and let them roll, would you? It depends. What's it like between here and Corpus?
Yeah, I don't know. I've never been to Spain. And do you go through other little towns?
Yeah, you walk through little towns. We'll just see things. You may walk along rolling hills and vineyards. You may be on a path that is a hiking trail about that wide, or you may be walking by the edge of the road.
Okay, well, that's what I was
It just depends. But you walk along. There's probably a town every 3 to 5 kilometers, or some sort of stopping place. The longest distance I had without any sort of conveniences was 17 kilometers one day. We had to go up and over a mountain. And so through a rainstorm, too. That made it really fun. Oh, right behind us. We can't go back. That was canola. Canola, like canola oil? Those yellow flowers are canola. Yeah. There it is again. So that's our son, James, and that's fields of canola behind us. So we walk through fields of canola, or walk through olive orchards, or vineyards, or wheat fields. Going into towns is nasty because it's industrial areas. All right, Rachel.
I was just wondering, as you made deep connections with people, did you want to continue after y'all left? I mean, did you?
So did I want to continue after I left? Yes. Did I think about it earlier on? No. I started like the last week getting people's phone numbers. WhatsApp was really good because everyone can use WhatsApp. So that's canola, and then those were poppies too, wild poppies just growing there. So that's just a, kind of a dirt trail that we were walking on there.
I was just thinking your friend base must just grow.
Yeah, my friend base grew, but I didn't get contacts from them.
Okay.
Yeah. Somebody else.
We just have somebody here who has walked the trail twice.
So have I lied?
No, but, everybody's different.
Everybody's different.
Everybody's different.
All right.
Everybody will have a different story.
There you go. All right.
How much money?
How much money? So I 30 euros a day, so $35. You can live pretty well on the Camino if you're staying in an albergue at 8 euros a night. I mean so I went for about 30 euros, $35 a day, except when my sister was with me, because we stayed in hotels or apartments. And so my housing for the 5 days she was with me matched the total for the rest of my time. Bob.
How was the weather? Did you have to walk through a lot of rain?
Okay, how was the weather? How was the weather in the month of May? So it varied. Going over the Pyrenees, first day, it was beautiful. Sunny skies, awesome. The next day, it was going downhill. It was torrential rain for 5 hours through something they called the Dragon's Teeth. And it was, you've done this. Yeah, you've done this. And it was torrential rain. And there, at first trying not to step in the gullies of water and just going through it. But then the next day would be beautiful. Only had to walk through significant hail for a couple of days. I think the most interesting one, my son and I, we'd been walking, and it had been raining off and on all day. But we'd had our raincoats, we were fine, and we'd been walking with some people, and my son had to stop and adjust his shoe, and so they got a little bit ahead. And we were going into this town where we were staying, and the people we'd been walking with were, 5 minutes ahead, and they turned off into a bar, and we went on to the albergue, and we got like 20 meters past the bar, and the heavens opened. Just buckets. And, within 30 seconds, we were drenched, and so we just went on to the albergue. It was another 5 minutes, but but then other days, great. For the first couple of weeks, early morning temperatures would be upper 30s, lower 40s, getting up into the 60s. So I would dress like this. Later on, days would start off in the 50s and get up into the 80s, or low 90s, and I dress like this. Long. And walking westward the whole time, it means the sun is never in your face. Because I'd try to stop by 2 o'clock every day. So, had a wide brim hat. Oh, that's up there. Answer your question? Marianne? What brand of shoes? Merrell. I wore Merrell. A lot of people just wear tennis shoes. No, just like trail runner tennis shoes. These worked for me. I just need the arch support in them. Very few people except Germans wore boots. Because you're also, not only you're on a hiking trail for 4 hours, and then you're on the side of a road for 2. And so going with something comfortable. Bonnie, you were just... Yeah, I was. Okay. Cheryl. In addition to Santiago, I went to 2 big cathedrals, one in Burgos and the other in León. I don't know which one is which. That one, that is in Burgos. No. That's in Santiago. That's in Santiago. Yeah, that's the cathedral, a different view from Santiago.
Can you rent a bike, like walk part of the way and then ride?
Yes, you can rent a bike. There's a section called the Mesteza, which is like flat. It is flat and straight and hot. And a lot of people will rent a bike, and electric bikes now too, and take a week to do a 2 or 3 day trip, which would be a week of walking. There are also people who do it on bike. There's one guy who did it in a wheelchair. He was a double amputee from Ireland, and he was doing it unaccompanied. So going up a mountain trail, he would be really slow, but get him on that open flat space, and man, he was booking. Wow. Yeah, he had lost both his legs when a train ran over him. Oh. Mary D?
Did you see any cars?
Yeah. Did I see, oh, I'm sorry, her question, did I see any cars? Yeah, there are cars everywhere. In fact, if you want to hail a taxi, you can hail a taxi. No, they weren't on the path where I was walking, except some of the places out in rural areas. But, they'd be on the road, and we'd be on a path. I tried to take paths. There are alternative trails, too. So a lot of times I would take a trail that would go off of the main road just to get away from carbon monoxide. Yes, neighbor.
Yes, neighbor. Do you want to do this again? And if so, would you do the same route? And how soon would you go again?
Do I want to do this again? Yes. When my wife says I'm ready, I'm there. So it'd be kind of what she wants to do. I doubt Mary, my wife, would want to do 500, 550 miles. She might, but we could do a different route. I really want to do it's called the Camino del Norte. It runs along the ocean up at the top. The view is supposed to be amazing. Yeah. What else?
One of the things I noticed was that as we're on the trail, every once in a while, pretty close intervals, you'd see a scallop shell, which marks the trail. And as you're going through town, you'd see scallop shells either in the pavements or...
Yeah, they don't want you getting lost.
Yeah, they're just everywhere.
They're everywhere. So either yellow arrows, la flecha amarilla, or seashells marking the trail. It's just amazing how intentional they've been about helping people find their way. What if the church were that intentional about helping people find their way? Wouldn't that be cool? That we just help people along the journey. Yeah, here's the next mile marker. Here's the next way. Here's the next step to go. Linda. Mm. So interaction with, you're out the whole time. I think walking through the wheat fields and the canola fields, just seeing the beauty, walking. I love walking through the mountains, and Linda, that's just holy for me. And so I guess I didn't even go there because that's just part of who I am, encountering the holy, walking through nature. A lot of birds. I didn't see other wildlife, probably because they heard us coming. But just that sense of walking and being out in creation for so many days, and not having these things for a month. I mean, I texted my wife and I posted one picture to Facebook a day. I didn't call my wife. We just texted. So I was unplugged from this for a month. That was really holy for me. But being out and walking and experiencing.
Were the people all walking one direction, or did you have people going both directions?
So for the most part, are people walking one direction or going both? For the most part, modern people just go to Santiago. But I visited with several people who had done the walk to Santiago and then come back years later and done the opposite route. But for the most, I would say 99.5% of the people are going to Santiago and then taking a bus or a train or a plane. How did I get from Madrid to the starting point? Well, I finally bought a train ticket, thanks to Greg's wife nagging me about it and being so nervous. It was the day after the power outage. And so I, was 5 hours late, which meant the train was free, by the way, because if it's 90 minutes late, it's free. One more story, and then I think it's about time to wrap up. What's the running of the Bull City? Pamplona. So I took a train from Madrid to Pamplona, and then the next day I took a bus. But I had planned on staying in an albergue in Pamplona, but I ended up getting there so late that the albergue would have been closed or full already. And so I didn't have a place to stay. So there was a woman riding the train from Madrid, and we started a conversation with each other. And as we were talking, I used my phone, and I got a hotel in Pamplona. And then she asked me, how are you getting to your hotel? And I said, I'm just going to walk. It's like half an hour. I'm good. It was 10 o'clock at night. And she said, my boyfriend will take you. She was going to see her boyfriend in Pamplona. And I was like, no. And she said, no, my boyfriend will take you. It's fine. And I got off the train, and I had to jiggle my stuff a little bit, my pack, and rearrange stuff. And so I thought, they've gone on. But she and her boyfriend were waiting for me. And he loaded up my pack. And then he got me about from here to that window away from my hotel. And he said, I'm sorry, I can't get you any closer. But that's the idea of hospitality that just floored me. That someone that I had met on a train would volunteer her boyfriend to take me to a hotel, because that's part of the Camino, is people are going to be that welcoming. What is that? Oh, do we have the... Yeah. Wagner. This is where the werewolf idea comes from. All right? So Texas, we have the Chupacabra, and there's Bigfoot in the U.S., the Wagner, documented all the way back to 1493. So that's kind of the origin of the werewolf story from that. Right, that was right before I got to the coast. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you talk about hospitality and community, and isn't it a shame that here in I feel like so many times we're told, stay out of it. It's none of your business. Don't stop and help because this or that. What a shame.
Yeah, it's a different. So the question, it's hospitality. It's cultural thing. It's a cultural thing. Someone else had something back here, and I think it's about time to wrap up. I don't want to keep y'all here till 10 o'clock. Bob and then Javon. Yes, sir. Yeah, you tend to walk with people who are your speed unless you find someone really interesting and you decide to go faster or just go slower because they're interesting. I got a blister that I thought, man, it was going to knock me out. It was a week of pain. And I got it because I gave my son my good pair of socks because he was having problems. And I had a really fascinating conversation with a woman. And so I walked faster, just a click faster than I should have, and I wore it, and then I paid for that for a week, but it was a really good conversation. But I wasn't as good about walking with people who were slower, except for my big sister. And it's just like I'm spending time with, when I was with my sister, I kind of put my Camino on pause, because I said, I'm spending time with my sister. When am I going to get to do this again with her? Oh, there's a good idea. Could this be like what it's to be in heaven? I think it's a pretty good idea. Walking all the time? That sounds good to me.
You were pretty fast.
What?
You were pretty fast. You did it in, what, 31 days?
I walked 29 days. I guess it would have been 30 if I hadn't skipped a little bit so I could meet my sister.
He was pretty fast.
I was kind of in the second group of walkers.
Our tour guide, our Basque tour guide, told us a story about, an ancient story about the Emperor Charlemagne. When he started out, he wrote all his sins on his book. And when he reached Santiago de Compostela, he opened his book, and all the sins were gone.
Oh, story of Charlemagne. Yeah, doing that. And Corinne told me that this was a Jubilee year and I could get an indulgence if I would have done a lifetime indulgence.
Yeah, all you have to do is walk through the portals.
All I had to do was walk through the western door, which was open, and I didn't even know that. Oh, I hope this has been meaningful to you. Those of you who have walked the Camino, raise your hand so that people can see you. All right, Pam, did you have a question? Were these the questions, the things you wanted?
Yes, you answered all my questions.
Hot diggity dog. All right, thank you. Karen.
I just want to thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Thank you.
Taking the time. And I thank everybody for coming out.
Yep.
And I'm sure if you have a question you want to ask him personally, he'll wait around a few more minutes.
There are cookies in the lobby.
Please eat.
And then I've got the certificates that I got. One's in Spanish, one's in Latin. One's just for walking the Camino, the other's for walking a certain distance. So thank you. I hope this has been meaningful. It's been fun. Yeah, so isn't that beautiful walking through that?